We're back on Country Pocket with John Depew. The new album is Bell of Hope, and you just heard Bell of Hope. Um, you asked so many questions on this album. Um, is that how you go through life? Are you questioning everything, looking into those deep philosophical angles?
Um, yeah, probably. Uh, maybe less so the older I get. I've kind of started to feel like some of those questions are uh they're important to ask, but having having spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff, I've maybe started to settle into more of an idea of that maybe I'm not really going to find answers to a lot of that stuff, and I just have like the only thing that I think I can really do is just like wake up every day and try to like treat my wife and my kids with reverence and try to find openings to like make useful connections with other people and have these kind of conversations. But like I don't know that me kind of like sitting in my bedroom thinking about these kinds of things is really going to achieve anything. So I've relaxed on the questioning somewhat, I think, in recent times. But yeah, I'm maybe like pathologically philosophical.
Yeah, you could be worse things. This song is a massive project. You sort of trace the history of the universe in the process of asking these questions. Let me just zoom in on a couple that really fascinated me. Was the end planned out? Are there certain ways that things are always going to wind up? How do you stand currently on the question of fatalism?
Oh, man, I don't know. I mean, I think when you come from like a coming from like a sort of a Christian background in my life, my childhood, uh, which I want to be clear, like I don't harbor any kind of like hostility toward Christianity really, but um, kind of like one of the main arguments that comes out all the time is like, well, if God is in control, then like why is he letting all this crap happen, and that's like a good question that I don't have an answer to. Like I don't know if God is in control for one, but let's say that there is a God of some sort, and let's say that there is some level of like calculation in the way that events happen, that whatever that God being kind of like has some power over. Uh, you know, uh, it's a really good question. Why would things be so messed up? If that were true. Uh, I just sort of feel like I don't really have an answer, but I kind of want to just set that question out there and sort of just let it be. I don't know that I didn't really like set out to like preach on this stuff when I was writing this music. I just want to ask the questions. Uh, what do you think about fatalism?
Uh, I'm not a huge believer in it. Maybe on the grand scale, there are certain directions that things are always going to go in. But Certainly not on an individual scale. I mean, if I walked out of the house right now and drove my car into a tree, you'd probably see a much bigger difference in my life than if I just went to work like normal. And
Hmm.
that would be a decision that could profoundly impact my future.
Hmm.
Um, all kinds of things. You look at turning points in history, and it's easy to imagine things going completely differently if if this one thing hadn't happened. Uh, so I definitely think that humans have control over their destiny to a large extent. I'm not as convinced that things like, you know, things like the life cycle of the sun or stuff like that are ever going to be brought to heel. So there might be a certain framework that we have to follow,
Hmm.
but for the most part, I think we can make changes on top of that bedrock.
Hmm.
The
That's
smaller the scale, the more dramatic the change can be.
yeah, well said.
Um, One of the things I think you came down on in that song a little more forcefully is how inequality and comfort might be a hindrance to connecting with whatever God you may define.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's exposing, yeah, you're really listening, man. Yeah, that's it's I do feel like there's a large part of the population, and I wrote some of this stuff when I was carrying mail, and I had a nice retirement plan, and I was like saving money, and like I had this whole kind of like middle class thing going on, and um there's like a certain amount of insulation, I guess, that a lot of that's just easy to live in, when you sort of have like some kind of an income stream and like dependable work that you don't really have to like apply yourself that hard to like maintain. And it's like easy to sort of like slip into this paradigm where like the type of RV that you're going to own is what matters in life, or like things like that, like things that you would zoom out and you would say, well, that is this live on the air? No, probably not. I'll try to keep my language clean, but I get really mad thinking about this stuff. uh, you zoom out and you think like this stuff is totally irrelevant to anything that really matters. But yet, I think like in a comfortable life, it's easy for us to like lose context on like what what's going on in the outside world. I mean, like I don't. It does not matter what brand of peanut butter I buy. Like it does not matter when you put it in the context of like schools being bombed in Syria. I mean, like there's there's all this stuff that's happening in the world at large that and some of it even being done, ostensibly like in the name of protecting our freedom. And I don't, like that's a whole rabbit hole that we probably shouldn't go down because I'll get really mad. But um, but it's like, to me, I've sort of embraced over the years like a an idea that like maybe a little bit more minimalist lifestyle and a little bit more connection to just what's happening in the natural world, and a little bit of awareness about maybe how our actions might be affecting people in ways that we don't often think about in the insular environment of sort of what is like everyday American life. Those things might be like good for us in general. Like a lot of people, myself included, could benefit from like stepping back a little bit and saying like, well, okay, there's all this sort of illusion of choice in the economy, and there's like different ways that I can define myself to my neighbors, but none of that stuff matters at all when we're ultimately sort of responsible for like genocide in other places, like at least by our complacence, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So
How does
there you go.
one last thing, I don't know if the how would you define your opposition to genocide? I mean, I obviously you're opposed to genocide. I think most people would be, but um, is it from like a moralistic point of view? How from your do you draw somewhat on your spiritualism?
I'm gonna have to ask you to elaborate a little bit, I think.
I guess when you're upset about these things, are you coming at it from sort of a secular or a spiritual point of view?
Okay. So I don't know if I don't know if I've thought about that in that term. I mean, I would say it's hard to present an argument in which genocide from any point of view is a justifiable action. So I guess I'm probably coming at it from I I would say I just I huh, man, this is a tough one. I think uh
I from time to time I break my guests a little.
yeah, I'm feeling it. This is good. Uh I, I would say present to me an argument from some direction that makes genocide sound like a good thing.
I don't think I would personally, even for an intellectual exercise, I would feel sort of skeeved out by doing it.
Yeah, right.
So my take is no, I don't think I would. Um, I think most of the exercises in which it's presented as a good thing, I've seen, I've certainly seen it presented as, a secular, this needs to be done. This is necessary for our security. I've seen it from a religious perspective. These are heretics we must destroy. So
Yeah,
there are people who find ways,
yeah,
disturbingly enough, to make these arguments. I don't want to give them any credence, but they're
sure.
certainly makeable because they're
Yeah,
made on a regular basis,
right,
including by a uh, a disturbingly bipartisan coalition
right,
of American lawmakers.
right. Um, yeah, which so yeah, I think you're getting to a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to this. I just it feels so obviously stupid And I kind of feel that way about a lot of things, honestly, in the political sphere. And I think a lot of people agree about this, that I mean, it's just so beyond any, like, I just don't even understand how a person can rationally justify this kind of stuff unless you're able to separate yourself from any kind of like actual connection to the events, if that makes sense. So like if you don't imagine, if you okay, so let's say you make an argument that we should, okay, we'll take the religious side. So there are these heretics that we need to wipe out, right? Okay,
Hmm.
well if you imagine those heretics as people that you know, if you imagine the children in the schools as your children, it all of a sudden gets pretty hard to think about dropping bombs, you know? I mean, if you think about these people as other people, like people that you personally would interact with and know and maybe even like, boom, right? But it's so difficult for me to to get my head around how anybody can make these kind of arguments without separating themselves from a connectedness to other people in other places. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you may have hit the nail on the head there. One last one I want to hit you with. You confidently end that song by talking about ringing the bell of hope. How?
This conversation is a good example of a way, I mean, I think I could have written a 12-minute song about like chasing tail in the bar, and we wouldn't have had this conversation, right? I mean, so even if I don't come out of it with any answers, and maybe I've made a fool of myself even by trying to talk to you about this stuff. We're trying. These are conversations about important questions that we might as well be talking about because it's not going away. These things are not going away by us ignoring them. Uh, so I think in some ways the ringing the bell of hope, is like it's 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 getting up every morning and just trying to be nice, just trying to be a nice person. It's like trying to be compassionate to your kids or your partner or people that you interact with at work. Even if they're idiots, just trying to be respectful and like, uh, just trying to treat people with the kind of reverence that we want to see in the world, right? I mean, I think we've kind of got to figure out a way to stop categorizing people into different groups that are othered. And that comes from small actions. It comes from like just giving somebody a sandwich or like, I don't know. It's like it's or having a conversation. Having this conversation right here. I think it makes me hopeful that there are people like you that would want to ask these kind of questions on a radio show. That's kind of blowing my mind right now, even if I haven't had answers very well. But that's it. It's just engaging in a way that's like serious and thoughtful in the world, I think.
Yeah, also, I think I'm somewhat interested in the way you end the album because it's the one song where you seem to not really be questioning. It just seems definitive. Like hey, this music and community thing is right. Is that
Mhm.
one of the ways you have in mind?
Yeah, it's one of the ways. I think, um, because I'm a musician and that's kind of like what I spend a lot of my time doing, that's a manifestation that I see a lot in the world, where, people come together at a live show or at some kind of event where music is happening, even at a jam, maybe especially at a jam session, where all of a sudden, the focus becomes on something that everybody's interested in mutually, right? So maybe sometimes that's me on stage, or it's in the collective experience of making music. If you got a bunch of musicians together that are playing, and and because that focus has shifted into a category of sort of mutual appreciation, all of a sudden all this other stuff, like political divides and different things like that, uh, all of a sudden don't matter, and you can have people who would normally never get along with each other if they were having conversations about like abortion or something. you know you can have people who normally couldn't find anything to agree about, really, who can sit next to each other and have a great time and walk out of the room feeling like, they're part of the same community. And so that's one role that music can have. I think there are a lot of other things that can probably accomplish that, but music is kind of the space that I live in. So that's kind of how that manifests in my experience, if that makes sense. But I'm pretty confident in that one thing, at least, that music is definitely a tool to shift the focus away from some things that maybe, I don't want to say don't matter, but things that are divisive, at least, and maybe divisive beyond the point where it's helpful. Music helps to bring people back together and focus on uh, a collective good of some sort.
Yeah, I appreciate just the way these questions are asked. This album could probably appeal quite nicely to a wide variety of people. They might come up with different answers, but to me, I've never been particularly impressed with the type of religion that doesn't ask questions and embrace kindness. So the people who won't find anything here, it's okay if I don't see them at the.
Yeah, there are other people making art for that. I don't need to do it.
All right, John Depew, I gotta ask you to finish off the show by choosing any song that you feel could go along with this conversation, just so long as you had nothing to do with making it.
Oh man. Uh, how about um okay, so this is going to be a an oddball probably for your show, but I'm going to say a song by the band Me Without You, and the song is um hold on, I got to figure out what the title is of it. Wolf Am I. Wolf Am I.
All right,
You.
I'll trust you.
It's out there, buddy. but I love the song. It's a thoughtful, uh kind of like a indie hardcore almost kind of thing that band has going on, but super thoughtful lyrics, really good stuff. So it's not country, but
Thanks so much for coming on, John.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a